Hi, it's Nayetta here on Let Kids Play podcast with another episode. And today I'm excited. I'm excited when we bring guests on, but I'm really excited because we have Jill. She's a play coach and a parent coach, and I know this is going to be a fun episode because we both love play. So I'll let Jill introduce herself. So tell us about you.
Yeah, hi. I know. I'm so excited to talk to you too. I feel like even our communications before, I was like, oh, we were on the same page about all the things. But yeah, I'm Jill Lerman, and I'm an early childhood educator, a play expert and coach, and also a mom. I have a 3-year-old daughter. And yeah, my goal is really to empower parents that are feeling overwhelmed and burnt out and help them to find the joy in parenting, and to make the environment in their home the connected and playful environment that they always envisioned having. And I kind of use the tools from my experience in the classroom to help people facilitate that in their homes.
Okay, so I want to start as an early childhood educator for you in the classroom. What were some of the things, or okay, so let me go back because it's so many things, questions go through my head. So, how long were you in the classroom before you left?
Yeah, so I was teaching in preschools in and around the Manhattan area until I finished out the last year I did that, I guess, was 2020. When the pandemic happened, I finished out that school year virtually, which was interesting. And maybe we'll talk about that, or we won't, with the 2-year-olds that I taught. But yeah, I finished out that school year. I also found out that I was pregnant right as New York City, where I was living, shut down. So it was really a time of transition in many ways. And I was starting to think about what life would look like in terms of my work when I had my daughter. And that was kind of already on my mind. And then with everything that happened, it just kind of pushed things in a different direction that I could not have foreseen had the pandemic not happened. But up until that point, I had been in the classroom, I guess it was a little over 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've seen some things. So that leads to my next question that I want to ask.
That is true. I have seen some things.
What did you see inside the classroom that you felt there was either like a gap or like a piece missing that drove you into play? Because I can imagine being in the classroom. Were you at a play-based learning center or?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Over the course of my years teaching, I worked in different early childhood settings in preschools. I primarily worked with toddlers, but I would say that most of every school was a play-based program, but in different ways. Some were more traditional, nursery schools that were play-based, but a little more traditional. Where I landed toward the end of my classroom career was in a more progressive classroom. It was in a Reggio Emilia inspired school. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Yeah. So it really rocked my world and changed my life forever. It really did. I watched, at first, if I'm being honest, it was a little bit, I was excited about the transition, but it was a little jarring for me because having come from more traditional nursery school and preschool environments, I was used to like the themed classroom, and the bright, exactly, circle time, the bright, the banner and the bulletin board with the theme and the thing. And I kind of, I prided myself on the work that I put in that regard. And so starting in this Reggio inspired school where I was like, the walls are bare. It's very neutral, very peaceful, but very plain, and it felt empty. And it was just so contrary to everything I knew. But what started to happen as I engaged and immersed myself in the environment, and then I became so passionate, I went on to do every workshop, every additional training, like everything I could do to learn more. But I just saw unbelievable things happening with these children. And I saw how materials were coming to life in their hands without me having any kind of specific goal or outcome in mind, but rather putting them out in a way that was inviting and interesting, and then seeing what they did. And I would watch the most amazing things happening, when I was creating curriculum and kind of building the year around their interests and letting them guide the way. And just the growth I saw, and the only way to describe it, I keep coming back to amazing, is that because it was. And after that happened, I was like, oh gosh, like I could never go back.
Yeah.
I could never go back.
It's
Yeah,
amazing to see how they learn.
it is. And I just felt like, oh gosh, like, there's also all this pressure, I think, and I was in the earlier years, so not even as much so for me as, say, teachers at an elementary school level or middle school or high school beyond. But I know there is a lot of pressure, from the system, and there's guidelines and there's things, that we're supposed to be hitting and teaching toward. And this just totally like changed my perspective on everything forever. And starting to realize, even I like on the early childhood level, there had always been this kind of system in place of like how we approach, let's say, letter identification and pre-reading to build reading skills. And in the Reggio inspired environment, that just was like, it was a totally different thing. Now this was like, no, we're going to integrate. That's going to happen naturally in the play that they're already doing. We're not going to be, introducing like, today, this is this letter of the day, and it makes it, no, they're two. And instead, with just this shift in mindset on our part, that letter identification, like that all came. It just came naturally, and in a way that was tangible to them. And just observing all of that, it just forever changed my perspective and then the direction of my work. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so for our guests that may not know, explain the Reggio inspired learning, because it's a little bit different from play-based. We talk about play-based a lot on here, or purposeful and intentional play. So explain that for my moms that may not know or may be a little bit curious about what it is.
Yeah. So, I think there are so many different amazing educational philosophies that are out there. And a lot of them, there is overlap. And I think there certainly is a lot of overlap in, what you talk about here and in the Reggio inspired philosophy. But I'd say the biggest defining things are Reggio Emilia, which is where this philosophy originated, is in Italy. Obviously, I'm here in the States, and this school I taught in is in New York City. I'm in New Jersey now. My daughter actually goes to a Reggio inspired school in New Jersey. So they have them in other places, but of course, the only place that you can really be Reggio Emilia is Reggio Emilia. So Reggio inspired schools really, take this philosophy and kind of adapt it. And I'd say like the real kind of, trademark things are very much child-led, very much centered around respect for a child's ideas. So what the children say and what they come up with is valued. It's valued in terms of how the teachers then may approach learning. It's valued that if they come up with an idea, that the teachers will try to create an environment to bring that idea to life and support it, however crazy it might sound. And also that it is child-led in that there's just like the utmost respect for their work. So even in things like in the documentation in a Reggio classroom, you'll notice their artwork will be, displayed on the walls, and underneath it, you might see some quotes that the child expressed as they were creating this thing that kind of give you some context for where this idea came from. Or it may have some pictures of the process of making it next to the finished product. that type of thing. So that respect is just really there in the way it's displayed, and the value to their ideas and their work. And the other big thing is, the environment of the room. I know I mentioned like we're not having like the crazy, colorful clown circus themed classroom is not really a part of this. It's very much about having a neutral space that then what brings it to life are the children's work, or natural elements that bring that peace, and that connection to the outside. And I guess the other one would be the teacher's role in the classroom, which is really more of a facilitator and an observer. This was a time in my teaching that I really learned what it is to be a good observer of a child's work and a child's play, and how to facilitate without kind of changing the course of what they're doing. And that was invaluable for me, not only as an educator, but even now as a parent, and is a really big part of the work I do in helping other parents.
Because it's a lot to take a back seat to your child's learning, because you're the parent and sometimes the authoritative person. So it's hard to take a step back and take instructions and follow your child, because you feel like they're the ones learning, which they are, but we're just I call it the activity guide. We're the guide. We're not the teachers. We're just guiding them along to make sure, like, they're safe, but they're the curious ones that are learning this new environment and this classroom. That's the world is a classroom, is what I say. I love that, and I love that you put emphasis on how invaluable it is for us as not only teachers but as parents to step back. And I want to ask, I don't know, and I hope this doesn't rub any parents the wrong way. Do you think that's one of the hardest things with coaching your parents is changing their mindset and mind frame of taking a step back and being the guide or the observer?
Yeah, I think that usually when families reach out to me and they're taking the step that they want to have this shift in their home, they want to see more play, and they, want to have maybe, a different environment than what they have. The desire for the change is already there. So I think it does take a certain amount of like open-mindedness kind of coming into the experience, and sort of knowing that like, hey, this is going to be probably different than maybe what I've done up until this point, or maybe the way I was approaching this. So I think that usually when I'm working with families that's there. So there's not so much resistance to that. But I would say there definitely, I would say in many cases, is like an element of surprise. I think we kind of have this idea, right? Like we have this idea in our mind of what we think it is to be a good teacher, to be a good parent. And often part of that is like, we get down on the floor and we play with them and we do and we this. And of course, that is one way to connect. But what we don't think about is how our involvement as adults and our skill set and, our level of cognitive thinking, how we kind of change the shape then of a child's play with our involvement, right? Or with our interference. And even well-intentioned, what that then does to a child's play skills and their ability to play and to learn and all that stuff. So I think, once that awareness is there, it's kind of like you can't unsee it. And then it opens your mind to like, so it's almost like, I don't know, I think about it like a sitting on your hands, right? And I feel like that's how I like kind of describe it to families I work with that are new to this. It's just sort of like resisting that urge, and taking that step back, or kind of reframing what your role is. And instead thinking about, how do I provide the environment, maybe the prompt to spark the play and the materials to spark the play and the learning.
That's the key.
Right. And then like
providing a step back.
That's right. And then I go back for, I like to call it an active observer, right? Because we're there and we're present. And we're the presence, I think, is a key component in this that makes it different. I think there's also a place for when play is happening completely independently of you and you're kind of off doing something else. But in this particular situation, and so you're there and you're present and you're watching, you can gain so much information watching your child play for even just a minute to 2 minutes without interfering. Like, you can learn so much.
It's truly mind-blowing how their minds and their brains work.
Yeah.
I love that. I encourage parents to get down at their level and play with the little ones, but I call it, you don't have to be the referee. You don't have to like blow your whistle or put your hand out there and say, no, don't do it this way.
Yes.
These are the rules. Let the little one make the rules. Like I always use the example. If they want to color their frog orange or rainbow, because rainbow is a color for them, it's okay if the frog isn't green. If they, this is when that gets parents. If they want to mix the Play-Doh, they can mix the colors of the Play-Doh. It's
right, and that there's value.
learning.
There's value in that, and there's learning happening in that. I think that like that's something that also for me was really eye-opening, especially in the more like progressive and child-led environment. One thing that comes to mind was I remember I set out like an exploration at the table where it was like a painting situation. And, we had like a big butcher paper, like a giant paper kind of covering the table with paint or whatever. And then we had different things out in other parts of the room. And I remember one of the children took a toy car and brought it over to the paint. And my initial impulse was just to be like, oh, no, like that stays in the car. That goes over here. Like, no, we're doing this over here. That goes over there. And kind of gently string. And then I instead, like now with this kind of new mindset shift in this new phase of my time as an educator, was like, let's just like take a beat and see. And what happened? He starts rolling the car in the paint. And now we're making tire tracks. And then another child comes over with a different car and that had larger wheels and those tracks are different. And now the whole class is kind of coming over and exploring in their own way. And it just took on this whole other life. And I was like, gosh, none of this would have happened if I had stopped this. And from that moment on, like it just kind of changed everything. And now, even with my daughter, when I have like this impulse to sort of be like, no. Yeah, of course, certain things are a no, right? Like there are certain things that are like are no, there are no for safety, there are no, whatever it is, obviously. Yeah. But I find myself asking more often than not, like, does it have to be a no? Like, could it be a yes? And how freeing I think that is for us as parents, but also for them. And then the things they come up with are like things I never could have conceived of, right? If even putting it out. And I'm like, gosh, none of this would have happened. I would have deprived us both of this entire thing, right? You just don't know the direction that it's going to go at their hands.
You never know. And I love that. And parents often ask me, how did you come up with that activity? I didn't. I'm sorry. I love to take credit. My kid did. And I guess I can show you what they did, or you can let your child create something else.
Yes.
But I want to go back to the car example. So not only did they figure out a new tool and media to play with as far as their art work, but they also worked on different skills. And I think that that's where me and you play an important role in being one of the resources for the parents, because one kid had the small car, another kid had the big car, and they're doing different patterns, which is math for that age group. They're observing big and small, which is also math for that age group. And then if they're using different colors, they're mixing colors, which is also a key skill. I mean, if you go based on the common core standards across America, that doesn't happen to first grade, and it's happening in preschool. So those are some things that I think it's valuable and important for us to bring out to show the parents, like, hey, I know it looks like they're playing, but they're also very intentional about what they're learning, and you're building
That's
that
right.
background knowledge to where you don't have to, hey, sit down
Right.
and look at this worksheet on this is
Right.
big, this is small. No, they're doing it with their hands, and also,
That's right. Coming
constantly
into their brain
thinking
and their
and new
body.
on.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. No, completely. And I think that like this is something that's just so misunderstood in a lot of areas of early childhood education, but also by, just in general and by, many parents like that are well intentioned. But we think that in order for our child to acquire these skills that they have to be presented in a certain way. And that means worksheets, workbooks, flashcards. If it's not fully present in their body, especially in these early, we're talking like 0 to 2, 3 years old, like they're sensory driven creatures. They're in the sensory motor stage of their play. Like it has to be something that they take in with movement, with their full body, with their senses. And that is how they learn and how they take in the most information. And I think if we can find a way to let them lead the way, the learning comes. It comes naturally. And
it comes fast.
Yeah, like almost like sometimes maybe like too fast. I'm like, okay. Like my daughter now, like, I mean, she just turned 3, and I had no intention of like introducing letters in any kind of formal way, at this time or even before 3. But she just it actually started with signs. She was just so curious about like street. I think that's actually a very common thing, but like just curious about street signs and what they meant. And she would be, she's like 2 and change and would be asking about the different signs, and then started to recognize like that sign represents stop and that's this. And then would recognize, what are those things that make up this word, and the letter identification and this all just happened because she was asked. I didn't like sit down and say, today we're learning this letter, or we're going to,
right.
It's just been progressing naturally. And now she'll just like look at labels or look at stores or and just spell out, these things. And like, that was not the plan. I wasn't, but I think, yeah. And it just kind of like happened. Or I don't know, she had these magnetic letters that someone gifted to her, and she would just play with them, and she wasn't like spelling words or doing whatever.
Have them all
yeah, right. Exactly. Those are exactly that. And she would just like she would match like the upper and lower case, but it was like their mommies and daddies, and she would kind of have her own dramatic play thing happening, but then like learned all the letters. So I think we just we put this pressure on ourselves often as parents, as educators, that in order for our children to obtain these skills, we have to introduce them in a specific way. And I just see time and time again how play is the way. And that if we just let that course happen naturally, the learning all happens.
It happens. You can learn. So your daughter was naturally curious because she's sitting in the back seat. She's looking out the window, and she's just intrigued by all the things around her.
Yeah,
the
environment.
Her eyes. Right. So it's so many things that you can learn from a stop sign. You have the shape, you have the color, you have the letters, you have the outline. It's so many things that you can learn from just a stop sign.
And each kid has that, right? Like has their thing, that was her thing at that time. It's always constantly evolving, right? Like, as you know, but whatever it is that we're hoping our child is going to gain from like a skill-based perspective, all of those things can happen around their interests. There's always a way, whether it's the street signs, dinosaurs, whatever it is, that can happen.
Mom and Dad.
That's right.
Mom and Dad, learning the letters in your names and learning Mom and Dad letters and stuff. Or like you said, if they're into dinosaurs, kids will learn to say T-Rex. Like most of the dinosaur names, first of all, are 2 to 3 syllables.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly very complicated. Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. And as you're saying this, I've been thinking to myself, like, again, the environment, like I'm thinking about like your kitchen, like kids just start to associate like, oh, I know that that box means this cereal, Cheerios, and then that word, those letters spelled right. Like those associations happen in a natural way, and they're all
So
around us.
let's walk the parents through that example, because I know how it plays out, but let's walk them through it. So you have a 2-year-old and they're pointing out their favorite cereal. What's the first thing that they say?
Right. So I think in that case, in the example that I just gave, if these are things that you're hoping to facilitate in your home, I would just be, and this is from infancy, honestly, I would be even saying this is like before toddler. I would just be constantly talking, right? We're constantly talking to our children, constantly just as we're going through the course of the day. It doesn't have to be a special predetermined script, right, that we do. But as we're taking out the cereal, talking about what we're doing, I'm going to take out your cereal. This cereal is actually, this cereal that we eat with the little, these are circles, right? See how they're round? They go all the way around. These are called Cheerios. You like to eat Cheerios? I like to eat Cheerios too, right? These are just like natural. You're taking it out anyway. And it's just like, we're just labeling the fact. I was just noticing the color on this box. Do you notice this bright color? This is yellow. This is the color yellow. These teachable moments, and you don't even have to be as direct. I mean, I'm kind of being direct for purposes of the example.
Yeah.
But these things that just like they're naturally occurring in the day. Each moment is like a learning opportunity, right? And it's just about how we kind of frame these things. Even look, like eventually when you get into like, let's say counting, as we're taking out the puffs or the cereal, we can count. We don't have to make a whole thing. Now we're doing counting. It doesn't have to be that. It's just as I put them in the bowl. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? 5 pieces. So I think that like, it's these little moments. I feel like you're like, yes. But like, it's these little moments. They're so simple that we almost don't even realize we're doing them. I think we often think that like, it has to be this like big thing to be impactful. And this is true in play too. Like, people that feel like the crafts and the stuff, like it has to be complicated to have meaning. Or if I want to work fine motor skills, I have to do this, that, and that. No. Like the simplest things are often the most impactful. So that would be my advice. I hope that answers that question. But I would just be like naturally narrating the things that you notice as you're going through these moments of your day. And once your mind kind of becomes attuned to that, you'll realize they're everywhere all the time, always, right? Like if we're constantly just kind of narrating we're naturally giving our child the opportunity to associate words with their meanings, right? With the objects that they represent, or with, their color, with their shape. Like all these things just kind of can be integrated naturally when we're in the mindset of just kind of going about the things that we're doing.
Yep, just having that natural conversation with them. It answers the question because like you said, it starts before they're a toddler. So you're setting that routine. So when they're an infant and you're talking to them, when they become a toddler, you ask, which cereal do you want? The circle cereal, the brown cereal,
That's right.
the orange box, the red box. So it builds on that because they have that background knowledge that you built. And the kitchen is a classroom within itself. There are so many motor skills.
The best classroom. The best classroom. I tell people all the time, like, look, my background is, and like my work is very much centered around play and, all the things that encompasses, but it also is about connection. And the kitchen is like one of the best places for learning, for connection. My daughter has been in her toddler tower since she could stand. And just like being included in the process, seeing what we're doing, like doing child safe jobs that obviously have progressed as her skills have progressed. But like, there's so much learning in that. There's science, there's math, there's sequencing and following directions, right? When we're cooking together,
color sorting.
Yes. Just so many. And it like goes on. And it also is like, these are things, that you have to get done in your day. So it's also like practical life and, including them in what it is to be a member of this family and of this home and the different work that goes into that. But there's constant learning opportunity in those simple moments. And I think that like recognizing that also takes off a lot of the pressure that we always have to be doing, creating. They'll be bored. We have to go here. We have to do this. It's like, no, these opportunities are there in even the things that to us as the adults feel like mundane and just, well, that's just like a whatever. That's a Tuesday. It's like, not to them. Like, my daughter's like, like if I am like, let's chop some peppers, she like her eyes light up, like her whole face. I get to do that. I'm thinking like, oh God, I have to chop the peppers. And she's like, we can chop peppers. Same with like the laundry. I'm like, oh God, I have to load the laundry. She's like, we can put it in the washing machine. I'm like, okay, like maybe if I could like take on some of that excitement, I'd be happier.
My kids, people ask me, how do I get my kids to do stuff? So I have 3. I have a 4-year-old, 7-year-old, and an 11-year-old. So my 11-year-old used to be excited about this stuff, and now he dreads it. But my 4-year-old is excited about this stuff.
Yeah.
But my 11-year-old has been doing it for so long. It's like automatic and programmed into him now to you wash your own clothes. My 4-year-old, like you said, he loves to wash. So he's like, I'll put the laundry in, let me press the button, and I'll turn on the light to watch the water come down. It's just a whole activity within itself. And then the peppers, before we started recording, I chopped up the peppers and he was taking a nap, and in my mind, I was thinking he's gonna be upset if he sees the peppers and he didn't get to cut them up, because that's his job. He likes to do it. So we just have to be intentional about including them, because one, like you said, is building that bond. They want to feel included. They want to feel a part of the team, because if we build that strong foundation and bond with them now, they'll stray when they're teenagers, but it won't be as bad. It won't be an isolated situation. They'll still be able to come back to you. So I love that.
That's right. And the connection, the trust, when that foundation is there, then as we're going through then these developmentally appropriate times of differentiation and kind of moving on, and doing your own thing. Like, I don't know, I have a lot of, that's not my area of expertise. I'm kind of like, oh gosh, like when my daughter gets old, that there's a lot of anxiety around that for me as a parent. But I also feel like, to your point, that we're building all of this so that even when that happens, that the core of the relationship is there, and that, we have these foundational things that have been built over time that can then withstand these different challenges and these things that will come in.
Even in those later years. I think it all starts now.
Great point, because that's my anxiety as well. Like I'm great for like 7, 8 and under. When we get into that preteen and teenager stage, I may have to reach out to Dr. Becky or someone to help me, because that's a struggle.
That's right. But I think even and I love her as well. I think that like even when I watch her content and when I consume, so much of what she's putting out there, I feel like that message is there though, right? That like it starts here, and that of course there are these tweaks over time, and there'll be new things that arise, but so much of the approach is the same, and that is one of connection and love and like a foundation of like love and respect. And I think that, when you're putting that energy in the early years, you're setting the foundation even as these challenges arise. And that brings me peace.
Yep. And it's all hidden in play. Like, you don't have to go get a psychology degree to figure out how to create a bond with your child. Like, it's all embedded into play. So if you're just intentional about how you play with your little one, you're not only teaching them in a fun and engaging way and speaking their love language, you're also building that bond and strengthening your relationship when it matters the most. Because like I said, they're going to go through all those preteen, teenage stages, but you've already set the trust, you've built their confidence. They know that they can come to you good, bad, ugly, however it looks. They know that they have their parent right there by their side.
That's right. So
you have this amazing freebie that I want to ask you about.
Yeah.
It's promoting independent play. So I wanted to ask you, what exactly is independent play? I know a lot of my audience is mostly stay-at-home moms. So a lot of them are looking for a way to get that break.
Don't I know it? Yes. No, it's a great question. And I, even as a mom who I freelanced and I kind of like designed my business at this stage to also be the primary caretaker. So I know that struggle personally of like just needing a moment back to yourself or to get something done, whether that's work-wise or self-care or just things around the house, whatever it is. And independent play is a really important tool in that. So I would describe independent play as really anything where your child is engaging without adult assistance and participation. And I say that like that's different than not having adult supervision. I think sometimes those things can go hand in hand depending on your child's age and ability. Like it could look like your child is
and kind of mastering these different things. Play might look like dumping things out of bins and then filling them up, or like it's like
you're catching on to something, kiddo. Even if you're making me a little nuts. But yeah, so it's really independent play. What the trademark is really going to be that it's going to be play and engagement that's happening without adult assistance and participation. And this is such an important thing because, like we were kind of touching on earlier, there is something to be said, of course, for that, those connections and moments of bonding and the interacting and playing with your child, right? Of course, I'm not discrediting that at all. But we as adults, when we get involved, we change the course of things, even with the best intentions. And it's really important for our child to be able to build those problem-solving skills and foster that sense of independence and confidence and allow for that creativity and allow for those connections to be made with the world around them on their own terms. And I think often parents, especially many of the stay-at-home moms that I work with, or just moms, period, feel like a sense of guilt about letting their child play independently. And I want to just like put a stop to that today. If you're hearing this and you're listening to this
right now,
let's just stop. But I think if you can reframe it for yourself as like, this is actually incredibly beneficial. Of course, yes, it's beneficial for me, and that is important too, right? That is important to give me that time back and those moments and those pockets. But I think if we can reframe it as like, this is so beneficial for our child, and we're actually doing them a disservice if we don't give them this space to interact on their own and see where things go without our direct involvement and participation, and how there's so much value in that. And I think if we can remember that, it makes it a lot easier to then give the independent play its space and its time in our routine.
Yeah, I completely 1000% agree, because like you said, sometimes they get confused, or parents are confused, like, are you telling me to let my child play unsupervised? No. Even if you're sitting there in their space and you're quiet, sometimes the kid feels pressure from that you're going to be, or that you're going to change the scope of what they're working on, what they've already figured out. Because like us, that we're thinking how something should go, but they're thinking probably 10 times faster on how something should be, and they're trying to figure out how it works. So sometimes the independent play is very good as far as them having a little distance from you, not even independent play with you sitting right there next to them, because they feel that pressure. And also, it's good to get in the habit of having an independent play, because that leads to them independently sleeping in their bed.
Right. And just like independence across, that's one area, across all areas, just by myself, right? That I can solve this problem on my own. I can kind of figure out how to make this happen. And that's something that then we take into so many different areas of our lives when we have that confidence that kind of begins there. I actually was just thinking to myself as you were saying, about like the giving the space and not kind of watching right over. I think it's such a valid point. And I think on the flip side of it is also that there are some children that like cannot get actively into their play without their adult nearby. And that if you are hearing this and you're like, that's my child, I would even venture to say that like, if they're doing their own thing and you're nearby and they can see and hear you, but you're not involved, that counts. Right? Like, I think, especially in the early stages, if you're new to building these skills or you have a child on the younger side of things, so just kind of bear that in mind. I think sometimes when we have the idea that like our kid independently means they're like off on their own, then if that isn't a realistic thing, especially if you have like, I don't know, a 1.5-year-old, a 2-year-old, a baby even, and you want to start, because you can start this from infancy on, in an appropriate way. Sometimes that's the only way that they will, and that still should feel like a success for you. So I think it's about, again, being that active observer and kind of knowing your kid and kind of figuring that out, because to your point, for some children that would be true and it kind of infiltrates their process. And then you have the other side of it, which is like a child that just can't get into their own thing if they don't feel the safety of their caregiver.
Yeah. So my little one, sometimes he'll go play independently, and then within like 3 or 4 minutes, he'll come back. Hey, mommy, just checking on you. Give me a hug, and then he'll go back and play. So some kids need that as well.
Yep. Exactly. And just kind of knowing your child and kind of finding your rhythm and knowing that will evolve over time, like it always does, because that's parenting. You think you got it down and then it totally changes on you. But yeah, I think that's great advice, and just kind of having that awareness and knowing your kid.
Hey, Jill, I lost you a little bit. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Can you hear me now?
It's yes, I can hear you. I'm gonna go back to my seat. It's a local recording, so I may just have to download your local recording and piece it together.
Okay.
We have high winds and the internet is just not my friend today.
I know it's not. We're having horrible weather here too. It's not ideal.
Really?
Yeah, I don't. Remind me where you are.
I'm in North Carolina.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in Jersey City, so northeast, but it's just been rain, like epic rain for days, and wind and just craziness. Yes. So
and we had a tornado warning coming.
Oh God.
Tornado coming from Georgia. So I think it went first. I'm on the northwest side of Charlotte, and I think it went eastern, but we're getting all the winds and rain and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a lot. So I don't know if you finished the question.
I think
I 3 ways.
Oh no, that I didn't hear.
Oh,
So what was the 3 ways? I didn't hear that.
okay. I'm gonna clap so I can know where to edit.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask, what are 3 ways that parents can support their little ones in play?
Yeah. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is just to prioritize it, and to see it as a priority, to make time for it. I think that we have like these routines, and we think about, like, we make sure our child's eating at X amounts of time a day, and that they're sleeping, they're napping, that we're going to this class, or we're making sure we have time outside, whatever the things are that we consider. And I would put play into that and make the time for that in your routine, the way you do every other essential thing that you do in caretaking. Because I think you would agree with me. I see it as it is an essential. And it should be, it should be treated as such. So again, I'm not talking about like, we have to be so regimented at this time we do that. That's not what I mean. But I think it's a mindset. And I think that when you have that mindset, then you, one, see the opportunities everywhere, kind of like we were talking about earlier, but you also make a point of making sure that it's happening, because when it's of value to you and you see it as a necessity and not a nice to have, you make sure that it happens. So that would be the first.
Okay.
The first thing that I would think of. The next would be, to know your child's preferences. And I think that this is like where that no one knows no one knows your child better than you do, right?
Yep.
And that's like that maternal instinct, that parental instinct. And I think, the same thing applies to play. And it's just, again, about coming back to being that active observer. And what do you see? And I'd even go so far, this does not have to be like a formal thing with like a clipboard and a checklist, but like, even if you notice something like that, kind of like that you make a note of that in your phone, or that we kind of pay attention. Yeah, exactly. We pay attention to these things. Like, I often, one of the first things that I talk about when I'm working with parents, like one of the foundational things that we discuss is like, talk to me about, like your child's play. Like, what is your child's play superpower? What is their play style? Do they tend to gravitate more toward like physical, active full body experiences? Is this a child who's kind of averse to certain textures? Maybe do they really like building and constructive play? Do they love like imaginative play and kind of recreating things from their real life? Often it's not one answer, but it's just kind of like attuning your brain to, what is their style? What do they gravitate toward? And even past those things, like, is there a certain book or a certain character? Gosh, some of the clients I've worked with, like with infants, I always tell this story, not to go like so off topic, but it relates. When my daughter was an infant, when my daughter was an infant, it was like height of pandemic life, and we were like just kind of living in our sweats, and like every time I would lean over her with the drawstrings from my hooded sweatshirt, it was like her eyes just like popped out of her head. And then when she got to be like 3 or 4 months, she would like bat at it and she'd try to grab at it. And I was just like, gosh, she is like more enthralled with this than any of like the traditional like play things I'm putting out. How do I translate this into like an exploration for her that isn't her like tugging on my neck? And for me, that then translated to like, I tied some ribbons, like satin ribbons, like for wrapping like a present from her activity gym. And it just like blew her mind. Like the focus and the level of engagement. And it was just like, even in infancy, I could almost see this moment and feel this moment of recognition of like, you saw that I liked that and you like did this for me. You know what I mean? Like I could feel it. So, putting things out that they're into, even if it doesn't feel like a traditional play item, just kind of like looking at these things and thinking, how can I use them, to engage? How can we use this in a prompt?
That cardboard box is joy.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Right. There's like a reason the cardboard box is in the Toy Hall of Fame. And it's like, it is. or even like, gosh, my child like loves, if someone tells me like my child loves the bath, they're like obsessed with the bath. But we're having trouble maybe translating into like more, traditional play as we sort of imagine it. Like my mind goes to like, what if you put out a bowl of water next to their plastic blocks, right? And just see.
Create a car wash.
Direction, like, right? Just see what do they do, right? What happens? Maybe it's that, right? That seems like a really natural play progression. What you just said, that it becomes like giving a toy a bath or like a wash or something. Maybe it's just like you were saying before, the dropping in and what happens, right? Like, oh, like I drop it from higher, bigger splash, or different items have different, right? We don't know what it'll be, but if we know that they like this and we know that they like this, now we have the opportunity to kind of follow their preferences. So I'd say that would be kind of my number 2. And then the last one, I think, would be an awareness about the kind of items that we have around. I always say like, is this age appropriate is one, right? Like, is this open-ended, right? Is there one play possibility here or are there many? Is this something that can be played with in only one location, or can it go in various rooms, or it could go inside or outside, right? So that's another one that comes to mind. Is this like, something that's really similar to other things that we have around, or is this something that's a little more novel and unique? These are just a few. I could go on and on, but I think what it comes down to is just this awareness of what are the things I'm investing in, right? Because play items and materials that you keep in your home are an investment, or they should be. And how much possibility is it offering? Like, when you like, I always think of this like one example in particular, like the keyboard that lights up when you like hit the keys and plays a song, right? That toy that everyone had some version of in their childhood. It's like you do that and you do it and it lights up and it plays a song, and then you do it and it lights up and it plays a song. And then after a little while, it's like, okay, now what? Like when something like that, right. So something like that offers very few possibilities. Whereas something like a ball or, blocks, or even like little animal figurines or dinosaur figure, there's just so many ways something like that can be used.
Even like the
That's right. I think I might have lost
together, or like his crayons together. Just clip his pencils together, or they'll actually like line them up and create like a little bump or something with the cars. Like there's just so many different things you could do with so many things around your house.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I love that you said that, because I think household items are often the most underrated play materials at any age. I mean, the babies that I work with, like I'm always like telling parents like silicone cupcake liners, silicone trivets, bowls, measuring cups. These are and also our children are just naturally more inclined to be interested in the things they see us use, right? So there's like something about that too, where it's like, oh, like that's cool because my mom's touching it. But I think that like it is like those hair clips, like that. It's such an underused thought, and I think an underused resource in play, that we have ideas of like what traditional play objects and toys look like, and we don't necessarily think outside of that. But there's opportunity for engagement everywhere, and I think at different ages and stages, often these household items become a lot more intriguing. I mean, gosh, I would say like especially in the early toddler years, my daughter was just like obsessed with baskets and like filling baskets and emptying baskets, or like filling bags and emptying bags, even now still sometimes. And it's like the reusable IKEA bag was like the most used toy in our apartment. Like, here I am. I'm like, I work and play. We have like all the things, I pride myself on. I'm like, my child wants to play with an IKEA bag and a box. But I also kind of knew well enough to know that like, yes. And like that counts. And what a great and engaging material to utilize.
Yeah.
So I think, encouraging like
colors,
parents to
letters,
stuff like
volume.
Yeah. exactly, texture. Like there's like so much going on there. So I was like, you know what? Actually, good call. You play with that IKEA bag all you want.
Right. If you didn't get anything from this episode, you should have gotten the 3 things on how to be intentional and support your little ones in play. And then also that the world is a classroom, and is there anything you want to end us off with before we wrap up?
Gosh, I mean, I think you just summed it up so well. I feel like if there were going to be just a few takeaways that I'd want people to have, you've primarily covered them. I guess the only other thing I would offer is that if this spoke to you, and you're looking for support like this in kind of cultivating and seeing more of certainly a playful environment, but also just like a connected environment and a respectful environment in other ways, that I would love to support you in that, and that I do work with families one-on-one. I also have my free resource for independent play that you mentioned that has like a ton of tips, especially if you're new in your journey or if you've been doing it for a while and you just want to kind of refresh. And then also my Instagram, where I share all kinds of play and parenting ideas and kind of simple, doable techniques and strategies for people at home. So I'd love to connect with you guys, any of those places.
Okay, and we'll make sure that we add the link to the freebie for you all to grab and understand and play. We'll make sure we link the Instagram as well for you all to follow her. Thank you so much, Jill. I enjoyed this because I love talking about play, and it was just so refreshing to have someone that.
Oh my gosh, no, me too. I could like geek out. This is like my thing. I mean, I could just like go on and on. So it's so nice to talk with someone who's like-minded and shares that level of passion. And yeah, this was so wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
It was. Thank you for coming and joining me on this episode. So you all, thank you for tuning in. Like I said, we'll link everything for Jill in the comment section or in the description below for you to check her out. And then we would love for you to like and subscribe and share if you found something valuable from this episode, which we know you did, because play is your little one's love language. We're just here to help you and coach you through that. Until next time on another episode of Let Kids Play Podcast.